Okay, it is all yours.
Thanks so much. Well, it's a pleasure to join the class. I love being a part of CLU in this community. And the first thing I noticed is that the first slide is missing a word. This presentation is called Welcome to the Future, the Art and Science of Financial Planning in the 21st Century. And then this little box is supposed to pop up that says the Age of Uncertainty. This is a presentation that keeps evolving. It's something that I've been sort of playing with and thinking about for a number of years. And we started referring to the art and science of financial planning, I think back in 2003, when we dubbed the FPA Retreat Conference as the Conference on the Art and Science of Financial Planning. And what I hope to do for those of you live with me tonight, and also those of you who will be maybe listening in on this presentation later on, is to help you really step back from the focus that you have in a particular class, and really let's look at financial planning together from maybe it's the 50,000-foot level as we look into our crystal balls and look into the future. What do we mean by the art and science of financial planning, and what do we mean even by the age of uncertainty? So what I want to sort of focus on in our conversation tonight is just a few questions. I want us to think about what really is ahead of us. We've all lived through some trying times the last few years, and there's a lot of change going on in the world, and how does that relate to the work that we do and the definition of financial planning? What do we mean really by the art and science of financial planning, and how does that really impact how we view our work and our relationship with our clients? And in the context of that, I think it's really important for us to look at some of the research and surveys and consider not just our own perspective and assumptions, but actually what do our clients want, and really think deeply and be responsive to what they have to say to us. And then finally, a little bit of just my own opinions and thoughts about what 21st century planning needs to include and incorporate. And hopefully this will stir more questions than answers for you. And for those of you on the call tonight, please do feel free to raise your hand with a comment or question, or just type something in, and we'll make this a conversation as much as possible. So age of uncertainty, I just want to say a little bit about this, and it's kind of the duh in a way. We are none of us immune to the uncertainties and the difficulties that we seem to face in so many areas of our lives. The whole question of what is the future of work, and how long will the job drought last, and what will be the implications of that? And there are so many. Fewer people working means fewer contributions to Social Security. It means money not going into retirement plans. It means people probably having to make up for that maybe on the other end of their lives and working longer. And so the implications of that are enormous, and that has tremendous bearing on the work that we do and the thinking that we do in financial planning. And that, of course, leads to conversation about wealth in the middle class, and the what does the future of that look like, and the impact of that on the work that we do. I think, I hear a lot of conversations about, is that linear climb of prosperity and the growth of wealth a thing of the past? Who knows? But I think we are likely to hear more stories from our clients about less of a linear climb where one just continues to earn more and grow in one's career. We may see people changing careers more, taking sabbaticals, retooling, spending money on education later in life. And so I think, again, these are just signs of things we don't have answers to, but they're questions that I think in our profession we need to hold in front of us and think about. Always looking at regulatory policy that affect our profession directly, but also other types of policies, social policies, healthcare policies, tax policies, all of these things that have an impact on our clients, that we can do the best work we can, and then we get hit by some massive change, and we're seeing a few of those just consequences that policies will have on our clients. The impact, of course, of debt of nations around the world, who knows? Who knows what the solutions will be, and the impact of that on monetary systems. Always the unpredictability of our investment markets and just overall the global economic instability. So a lot of this sounds negative. I don't think it's all negative. This picture is actually a few years old, but I couldn't resist including it. AARP, as many of you know, is a magazine for those over 50. It used to be called, I think it was the American Association of Retired Persons, and that is no longer what AARP stands for. They have gone to just AARP because they understand the world has changed and that people are not retiring at the ages they used to. They don't think of those years in the same way. And here we have a picture of Bruce Springsteen. I hope you all know who that is. And I always ask the question of advisors when I show this picture, do you think if you were his financial planner, would your question be, Bruce, when do you want to retire? And what do you want to do in retirement? He strikes me as someone who loves what he's doing and plans to keep on doing it as long as he possibly can. And so that sort of brings us to this whole conversation about longevity and new aging. There's so much research around how vibrant and creative the aging mind can be. We know the statistics of people living longer, and someone 30 or 40 today, the likelihood of their living over 100 is actually pretty high. And so I don't think financial planning can be business as usual. If you're in this program right now studying the art and science of financial planning, I think to sort of overemphasize thinking of financial planning as retirement planning is really not a very 21st century perspective. I think it's very much a 20th century perspective, that financial planners going forward will be talking to people about the different phases of their life and how to maintain their health and how to use their financial resources. But the conversations about retirement, I think, are going to be vastly different. This is something that I just, again, think we are all a part of this conversation, and I think for those of us who've been in the business a long time in particular, and those of us who have been in the business the last few years, I think there is a sense of innocence lost. It's not like this is the first time we've been through difficult markets and difficult economic and global situations. But I do think this one was extreme and caught people by surprise by the breadth and depth of it and the length of it. And I think some messages have come out of that are related to this sort of 50,000 foot level conversation about the art and science of financial planning and this question of uncertainty. And in my conversations with advisors over the last few years and in my own experience, I would say, we all have a sense that we can't quite control as much as we hoped we could on behalf of our clients. We are clearer than ever that life is filled with uncertainty and that we've chosen a profession, frankly, that by definition has to accept it and address it. And so we can't hide from it, and we need to put it on the table when we're in conversations with our clients. That uncertainty is not just some of the things that we looked at on the last couple of slides, but it's the uncertainty in an individual client's life, their health. Will something happen to one of their children? Will they experience difficult times? Will they lose their job? Will some wonderful things happen to them unexpectedly? So the layers of uncertainty we know an individual faces are nothing that we can control, and everything that we have to consider as we try to help people thrive and make good financial decisions. I think as a result of what we've been through over the last few years, there's a sense that as professionals, we truly need to continue to develop our skills and our knowledge. And I think you're certainly doing that by being in this program. And those skills and knowledge, I'm going to suggest in the course of this presentation, have quite a bit of scope and breadth to them beyond the technical skills. And so that kind of leads us into the conversation about the art of financial planning. In this whole process, I know that advisors are thinking about the impact of what happened in the markets and in the world and its impact on their own businesses. And that causes one to think about how one is compensated, one's business model, strategies for that. We're having to rebuild real trust. And I'm going to spend a fair amount of time talking about trust in this presentation tonight. And then finally, maybe it's not so much innocent lost, but renewed awareness that the 21st century, we really are in a new world with new issues. And some of them are very exciting in terms of, I think, new technology and that the impact of that on the quality of our lives and potentially on our health, but also in communication and in ways we're not even necessarily sure yet, and certainly having an impact on how we do our work. It's a brave new world, and we've already I've already talked about some of this, so I won't belabor it. But these are all things that I think are on our radar and have to be on our radar as we consider how we work with clients. I think financial planners have to be futurists. We don't have the luxury of just living in today's world because we are planners. We, by definition, are looking ahead. We have to be critical thinkers. And that's really why conversation, I think, about the art and science of financial planning is one we need to have over and over and over again. We've talked about the first few points on this slide, but of course, environmental changes and natural threats. There was a story on the news just tonight, again, about global warming and where we're seeing impact and looking at some of the natural disasters in the world and the impact, again, in terms of uncertainty and unforeseen challenges that could place on someone. And what is our role in helping clients think that through? Terror threats, demographic shifts, we've talked about in terms of aging and an overall aging population, changes in jobs and housing. Will people make money on their homes? Will they recover in their lifetimes the value of their homes? Will they buy homes in the way that they used to? And the things we don't even know yet. So not to scare everyone to death, but I do think it's important to understand and to keep in mind when you're focusing so tightly on the sort of the technical elements of financial planning, that there is this larger framework, right? That we have to do what we do, and all of this has an impact on our clients' lives and on the work. And it leads me to one of my favorite quotes from my dear friend Dick Wagner, who is truly one of the great leaders and visionaries and thought leaders in our profession. And one of the things he has said is that we are called upon to help people deal with the most powerful secular force on the planet, money. Now, you may not agree that money is the most powerful secular force on the planet. Maybe that should be love, but there's no question that it is a powerful force, and it's one that it's almost the water that we swim in, right? We're almost not aware of its place in our lives. Another great thinker, Jacob Needleman, who's actually a philosopher, not a financial planner, once said, it's not that we think too much about money, it's that we really don't think enough about it. We're not conscious and aware about it. But I appreciate Dick's perspective in really helping us understand the scope of the art and science of 21st century financial planning. And sort of shifting gears a little bit, I think it's helpful to just pull way back and look at our world of financial planning in terms of, I'm not quite sure what to call these, but maybe they are the elements of financial planning. There is what we're going to talk about tonight, the art and science. The science, maybe we would call it those technical elements, the empirical, the theoretical, the quantitative aspects of our work, the factual, the data-driven. The art of financial planning, we might have a harder time defining. We'll try in a couple of minutes. Is it the craft of the practice? It's the innovation, the delivery, the process, the communication, the qualitative aspects that we know are valuable and have an impact on the outcomes of what we do. Then there's the profession of financial planning, which is really, I think, the context, the standards, best practices, it's regulation, it's the community of which you are a part, the community of professionals who make up the profession. It's our status and our standing. All of these elements go into creating and defining, I would suggest, our profession. The body of knowledge, I would say, lives in the science and in the art particularly. And then finally, there's the business of financial planning, which is the commerce, it's the delivery, it's your business model, it's how you charge, it's how you structure your business, your services, and all of that. And so this sort of just, really pulls back the lens and helps us just to, I think, just get some clarity on all of the different elements that we have to be mindful of and to think consciously about and address when we're approaching our work in this profession. So let's kind of drill down and talk about the science of financial planning. And at FPA Retreat in 2000, and I really appreciated that he came up with a definition, because I don't think I've actually seen one before, in which he said that there is a science of financial planning. It is the theory of optimal resource allocation over time and a knowledge of human behavior, psychology, and neuroscience. I think what I really appreciate most about this is that he is including human behavior within the science of financial planning. I think so often it gets regulated to the touchy-feely soft stuff, and that could not be further from the truth. There is good empirical research and evidence-based research that helps us understand human behavior, change management, adult learning, communication studies. All of those have a place in the science of financial planning as well as in the art of financial planning. But I think it's useful to have a statement like this that simplifies really what are we about. And you may agree or disagree, but I think it's a great starting point. And I don't think we can disagree that the science of financial planning does involve a theory of optimal resource allocation over time. And we'll come back to that just a little bit later. We don't have a great definition of the art of financial planning. I had to make one up, and I'm not really happy with it, so maybe as a class project sometime we can all take on a good definition of the art of financial planning. But when I have this conversation with advisors and students, it tends to revolve around the presentation, the delivery, the relationship with the client. So here I've called it the design, the delivery, and the creativity. And I've crafted this statement, which I'm still not quite happy with, so I need some help. But I'm saying creating the conditions through our creative and communication skills that help clients become inspired, engaged, empowered, and encouraged to put a plan in place to seek guidance when making decisions and to take the necessary steps and make the changes that will improve their financial resiliency and well-being. Oh my gosh, it's too wordy. I don't have Zvi's Bodhi's good economy of words or language here, but I think you get the gist that there is some magic potion or art or innovation in how we deliver, present, communicate that has to sort of stir the heart and not just the mind of a client. Because what we all realize, if we've been in practice ever, is that while we can craft brilliant strategies, the client has to implement them ultimately. We're asking people to change behavior, and that requires some sort of magic fairy dust. It requires some skill in the areas of communication, the ability to inspire and connect, and so and to tell stories. And so to me, for now, that's the best I can do around the art of financial planning. And what I'm excited about, of course, in our profession is that we're tending to the art of financial planning and giving it its due and understanding that these are skills that can be developed. And I think there's a lot of overlap between the art and science of financial planning. Another way to look at it in sort of a chart form that financial planners, we all tend to like these kinds of graphs, is to think about the scope of financial planning. And when I do that, I tend to think of the breadth in terms of the technical, those CFP board topics and modules those quantitative areas of knowledge and study that in which we need to be proficient and competent in order to deal with clients' issues. And we need to be able to integrate those and apply those in specific situations, run scenarios, do projections, give advice. The depth of financial planning, I would suggest, is the client context. It's the uniqueness of that client's life story, their beliefs. It's how we connect with them. And I have a quote from someone that I think will maybe bring this to light and bring this home. There is a model of money that was developed. Dick Wagner did some work on this that's based on a philosophical design by a gentleman by the name of Ken Wilber, who has developed sort of an integral model of knowledge, and it's been applied to financial planning and money. And I think it's interesting when we're talking about the art and science of financial planning, and as you think about your coursework, and we could spend hours just on this one thing, and so I'm going to introduce it quickly and then we'll leave it again. But what you're looking at are 4 quadrants, and on the left-hand side, we're looking at what might be considered the art or the interior or the depth of financial planning, and on the right-hand side, we're looking at more the exterior, the external. On the top, we're on the top 2 pieces, we're looking at I or my individual, and on the bottom half, this is looking at collective. So just to give you a little better explanation of that, on the upper left, we have my interior. That would be sitting with our clients and having a conversation to understand what are their money beliefs. What are their values, their subjective reality? You can't see it, you can't count it, but it's real. And it impacts how your client may respond to advice. It may impact their capacity to change their behavior, to make good decisions, to make the most of their resources. And so it's a critical component. We sort of have to look under the covers or do discovery. And that's one of the things we work on in the capstone course is our ability to communicate and listen so that we can bring some of this to light, these things that we cannot count and we cannot see. On the other hand, there is my exterior money, my data, the numbers, right? This is how much my income is, what I pay in taxes, how much I have in assets, how much of those assets are liquid, how much of them are tied up in real estate. This is objective reality. You can count it. These are the actions that we can take in the world. And so that's where we have traditionally focused our knowledge, our education. In some ways, it's our comfort zone. You could say that this is someone's net worth. The interior might have more to do with their self-worth or their confidence or their story. The other hand, when we look at the bottom half, we're talking about sort of us as a culture. And a culture has those same sort of invisible qualitative aspects of it. Those are the cultural norms and beliefs in a system. It's the family influence. And so, for instance, in our Western culture, we're a capitalist society. We tend to believe that growth is always good, that more is better. We tend to be a consumer society. We're driven somewhat by Madison Avenue. We do pay attention to what cars people drive and where they live. Even if we think we're not influenced, I think all of us are, because those are the cultural norms. If you're part of a particular religion, then there may be those types of norms as well that have an influence. And so those all go into painting the picture of someone's environment and who they are when you're addressing their relationship with money. And that, to me, is part of the art and science of financial planning. And on the exterior side of that, now we're talking about what can we see and count in our as a culture. So those are our social systems, the policies, financial systems, our currencies, rules and regulations, right? Our denomination of money, our debt as a society. So all of those things that have an impact. And so this is just, again, a very big topic, and I sort of drop it into this presentation, again, to sort of get you to think about the different ways we can organize how we look at the art and science of financial planning and the scope of what can be considered as part of the body of knowledge, potentially, of financial planning. And I think advisors are discovering some are more comfortable in dealing with that quantitative exterior, and others gravitate towards really focusing on the interior. And you're seeing more and more, firms growing up where, people are brought together who bring in those different skills and interests so that a client gets a very complete experience. This is the quote that I think was really interesting. It's by Dan Ariely, who was interviewed by Olivia Mellon in Investment Advisor magazine. He's the author of Predictably Irrational. And to me, this really merges the art and science of planning. He says, if advisors want to provide value, they have to earn their keep by ascertaining the part that is so difficult to figure out: how financial decisions map onto the things we want out of life. To me, that's a very simple way of saying we have to apply the science of financial planning to our clients and map those onto the things our clients want out of life. And that, to me, is the art of financial planning. So I think that's a very simple but eloquent way in that statement, where he has literally, in my mind anyway, sort of merged the two. I want to shift gears a little bit now that we've kind of laid a framework for the scope of financial planning and looked at sort of theoretically what is the art and science of financial planning. That's all well and good. But we can't have this conversation without talking about the client, without bringing the client into this conversation and their perspective. And so I'm bringing together a couple of different research projects, one that was conducted with the FPA and another one that was State Street Global along with Wharton School of Business, in which they surveyed consumers of financial planning. And this is just a summary of some of the things that they expressed were important to them. And these are my words, but sort of their points. Demonstrate your interest. I consider that, get to know us warm. Get to know who we are. Get to know our money stories, aside from just the numbers. Demonstrate your expertise. Demonstrate your commitment to the relationship. Demonstrate a commitment to your own business and its success. Deliver care and value, and track our progress and prepare us for the future. What I think is important here are the verbs: to demonstrate and to deliver. It's not enough to talk about these things with clients. We literally have to demonstrate them. And again, I think that gets to the art of financial planning. And again, some of the things that we talk about in the capstone course and practice are how do you demonstrate your interest and demonstrate your expertise in a way that is meaningful and encouraging to clients. In the survey that was conducted with State Street Global and Wharton, they interviewed clients and asked them the question, what do you dream of? What is your vision of the ideal advisor? Which I thought was very interesting. And one of the questions they asked was, has your advisor ever asked you this question of what is your idea of making too many assumptions about what our own clients need and want from us, when what we really need to do is ask them. And maybe that's part of the art of financial planning. It's not going to come as a surprise to you, I don't think, what their answers were in terms of what's most important to them, but somehow we still don't seem to get it. Overwhelmingly first was trust, and at the bottom of the list is what you see, investment performance. And yet when you talk to advisors very often, if you ask them what do they spend the most time worrying about, working on, and delivering conversation and materials and paper to their clients, it's on investment performance. And so maybe we really should ask our clients and make sure that what we're focusing on really mirrors this list. And so let's go into that a little bit deeper. This is another question they asked. They asked advisors Do you think your clients are satisfied? 56% of advisors in the study said, oh, yes, our clients are very satisfied. And yet in the same study, on the client side, only 24% of clients agreed. So when we talk about the art and science of financial planning, I think the message you get in this is that the science is all well and good, but it's potentially the art of financial planning that bridges the gap between client satisfaction and in our knowledge and our technical skills and the good analysis and advice that we're prepared to give. Obviously, what we saw was key is that trust is the foundation. And in this particular couple of research projects that I was focused on, they broke trust down into 3 different areas in which they were getting responses from clients. And so I think that's relevant to this conversation. The first is trust in your technical competency. Do you know what you're doing? And obviously, in your program at CLU, you are absolutely enhancing your technical competency. And I know at times it feels overwhelming, but it's well worth it. You're going to come out of this program truly, I think, with an advantage because of being in an academic environment and really having the opportunity to engage in discourse and testing and really deep thinking with people who have so much to bring to the table. And that's one of the ways you can demonstrate your technical competency. Other ways to do that are in your ability to give clear explanations, and that's, again, is sort of what we practice in Capstone. It's one thing to know a lot. It's another to communicate it clearly and simply and in ways that, again, are meaningful to clients, and that's the art of financial planning. Being a professional, being advice-driven, having your designation, your CFP designation, all of those help to build confidence in a client that you have your technical competency. The second area of trust is trust in your ethical conduct and character, which comes as no surprise in this day and age, but I think it takes a lot more work to establish it, given all that's gone on in the last few years. And of course, that just translates into, do I trust you not to steal money from me? And this is a real question that we have to be prepared to answer, and answer more than once for our clients. And so how do you do that? How do you demonstrate ethical conduct? It's not enough to tell your clients, well, I have to get CE credits in ethics every year, so therefore I'm ethical. This is something you build over time, and it's built through your brand and your reputation within your community and among centers of influence and among your longer-term clients. I think the designation, again, is a way that you can say to your clients, I care deeply about standards of practice and ethical standards, and of course the fiduciary standard, abiding by putting your client's interest first. But really, ethical conduct is something that just has to be demonstrated, and again, by putting clients first and doing what's right for them in front of what's necessarily advantageous for us. And then the final area of trust that they focused on is in your empathetic skills and maturity. And maybe this again gets to the art of financial planning. Do I trust that if I tell you personal things about myself, you will handle that well? Because we know that ultimately, in order that we appreciate the difficulty of that, I think it's one of the reasons a lot of us suggest it's good for a financial planner to have a financial planner and go through the process so we can actually sit in that chair where we are being asked to share our personal story, our financial story. We have to be able to demonstrate that we have emotional intelligence. We have to have genuine interest and be willing to invest time in getting to know our clients and putting their values ahead of our values. And this is something, again, that just takes time. I think some of the ways that you do that are in having some really key conversations with your clients. In Capstone and in Introduction to Financial Planning, I'm sure you talk about the 6-step process, and the first step is defining the scope of the engagement. That's not just a formal document. It's a conversation about what are the ground rules and what is the nature of our relationship, and how do you access the best that I have to offer you, and how can you help to make sure this will be successful and get you the results that you're looking for. Having very clear investment and planning philosophies, being able to articulate in a simple way what you stand for, what your process is, what you believe, gives clients a great sense of confidence. Helping them understand what is realistic to expect. This is a conversation that if you don't have it is the one that can bite you later, because inevitably, based on all the things we've talked about already, we know that there's uncertainty, that things will not always go well. And so having this conversation up front and setting realistic expectations is something that doesn't hurt you. It actually does develop trust. This is one of the most important conversations, I think, that we can have, and that is the conversation about what you can and cannot control. It's so interesting, again, that we put so much emphasis on one of the things we can least control, which is investment outcome. We don't know what rates of return we're going to get, particularly from one year to the next. We don't really know what rates of return we're going to get over any period of time. And so that's something we can't control. We can do our best to limit the uncertainty. But there's so many things we can help a client control. How much they save, what they will have if the unthinkable happens and someone becomes ill or dies way too early, how much to save, when to stop working. All of these things, there's so many elements that we can help them control and help them understand the difference that makes. And so that, to me, is a big part of the art and science of financial planning, of really digging in and thinking deeply and communicating deeply with your clients about what are the elements of what you are going to work with them on that are things that can be controlled and things in which we have to minimize risk as best we can, but be prepared for what we cannot control. A conversation about the client's role. If you have clients now, you've been through this. It's a funny thing, but when a client hires a financial planner, they have this sense of relief that now everything will be fine. They finally hired a financial planner. And of course, you and I know that the work has just begun. But sometimes we don't tell the client that. That's our little secret. But it's critically important in order to avoid, I think, shock and overload and a sense of being overwhelmed, to let the client know what to expect and what their role is in having successful outcomes. Again, talking about what can go wrong in the short term and the long term, and getting feedback from a client about how they would handle that. I have a friend in the business, Dick Bodra, who has added a really great question in his discovery process with clients. He asks them, if you were to overnight lose half of your assets and half of your income, what would you be able to let go of, and what would be critical for you to try to hold on to? I think that's a really important question. We often ask, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? That's a great question. But to really help clients separate what is critical for them and how they might deal with things going wrong, I think is a really important conversation to have. One that is so strange to me that apparently planners don't have is to talk with our clients about what success will look like. It cannot be that they'll know it was a successful engagement in 50 years when they retire or die. They need to get some experience of success and of improvement almost immediately. And so having a conversation about how they define success, what they're looking to see happen in the short term and the long term, and what will be some of the markers for, wow, this is going well, I feel better. Some of it might be qualitative. It might be a feeling. I feel more secure. I feel less stressed. I don't feel like I have a cloud hanging over me. I have more clarity. Some of it might be numbers. Our debt is gone. We have more reserves. Our net worth is going up every year. Okay, but it's important to have the conversation. When it comes down to it, this is pretty much what I think we're in the business of doing, and I share this with clients because we can get so overwhelmed by trying to define financial planning, by the process. But basically, I think it gets down to a core issue, which is really not that far off from what Dr. Bodie was talking about when he says optimal use of resources over time. Every human being is facing this tension, right, between what we want and need today and what we will want and need in the future. There is a tension there, and none of us are immune to it. And if you think about every client relationship, regardless of how much money they have, everyone, both the art and the science of financial planning, to bear on this tension and trying to help resolve it. Nobody wants to give up thriving today in order to thrive for the future that they cannot see. And no one wants to risk their future in order to enjoy today at the heart of it. And so to me, this is a core issue that bears discussion and sharing with clients, I think. Another thing, and this may have come up, Harry may have shared my analogy that I use to try to, again, give clients a quick sense of what we're up to in this whole business of financial planning, and to again try to merge the art and science of financial planning. And so when I'm first meeting with a client, I'll ask them, have you ever put a jigsaw puzzle together? And I would ask you if we were having more of a conversation. And of course, just about everybody at a rainy day at the beach has started a jigsaw puzzle. And I will ask, so after you've sort of laid all the pieces out on the table, what do you do next? Most people will say, and I don't know what you're thinking, but most people will say, well, I try to do the edges because I can tell what the edges are, and that's where I start. And that's a great answer. But what I'll tell clients is that as your financial planner, what I would suggest is the next thing that you must do is take a look at the picture on the box. Because really those pieces don't have any meaning to us until we have a sense of what it is we're trying to create. Is this a jigsaw puzzle of the Empire State Building, or is this a jigsaw puzzle of a lovely valley on a summer day? Makes a difference, right, in how we look at the pieces. And so in financial planning, what we do is we first help clients get clarity about what's on the picture of their life box, the box top of their life, right? What is the picture they're trying to create both today and in the future? And when we help them have a clearer sense of that, when we have a clear sense of that, now the pieces sort of come to life, and those pieces are their income, their tax bracket, their savings, all of those things that we have to work with. And when we have a sense of what they're trying to create and what matters to them, what that then allows us to do is to look at those pieces and say, okay, do we have all the pieces that we need? Do the pieces that they have, will they make that picture on that box top? Or do we need to make some changes here? Do they fit together? So hopefully that's an analogy that kind of pulls together, because there is such breadth and depth to what we do in our work with clients. And they need a simple way to, I think, understand it. And we need some guideposts as well. And that picture on the box top isn't stationary, right? Just like in your own life, things change, our desires change, our goals change, circumstances change us. And so that's why we talk about we do planning, we don't do plans. A plan has a static element to it. We're talking about the art and science of financial planning, which is a dynamic, ongoing process. I think a big part of sort of this bigger picture thinking about financial planning is more conversation about what do we mean by success, what's important to our clients, and what is the goal of financial planning. And I'm coming back to another quote by Dan Ariely, and this one was much more controversial within our profession, and an algorithm can do what overpaid advisors do, and probably with fewer errors. Felt like a pretty big slap in the face, but I think if we're honest with ourselves, there can be some truth to that if we are not careful and we aren't deeply exploring where the true value of what we do is for our clients. And his contention was that many advisors are asking the wrong questions. If they're simply asking, how much of your current salary will you need in retirement? What is your risk attitude on a 7-point scale? He's absolutely right. Those questions are generic. They don't get to the richer conversation about what matters to people. There's shortcuts. When I teach capstone, if I see a student try to solve how much a client needs in retirement with a simple percentage of their current salary, I'm very unhappy about it, because they don't need you and they don't need to pay you to come up with that number. They do need your help to think more deeply through what's the kind of life they want to live, what are some of the costs that you know are going to be there that they don't currently have, what are some of the things that will go away. You have much more experience and skill and knowledge to help them think through much more critically. And so what he's suggesting are the better questions. How do you want to live in retirement? What activities do you want to engage in? And then there's a whole bunch of more that you and I would add as we think about it. What's your family's health history? Where do you want to live? What sort of legacy do you want to leave to others? I love the final quote here. He says, "This saddens me because while I think that financial advisors are overpaid for the service they provide, in principle they could contribute much more and could even deserve their salary." That's brutal, but frankly, I think we needed to hear it, and we need it because when you really look at the true breadth and depth and scope of financial planning, and you think about truly the art and science of financial planning, there is so much value that we can offer people, but we have to get away from what's easy and do the real work. So coming somewhat to a close, I want to just sort of explore a little bit about this question of what are the goals of financial planning, because we read a lot of articles, we have lots of conversations at our conferences, and I think sometimes what we think are the desired outcomes and the measuring stick is really not the right measuring stick at all. It's very easy to sort of get drawn into defining success as getting a particularly good rate of return. Is it a particular rate of return, a stable rate of return, the highest, beating our neighbors? It's important to know what your clients think, but it's also important to know what you think. To have a clear philosophy about what matters, and that's beyond the scope of this presentation, but it should be conversations that you're having in your classes. It's not that investment return isn't important, but what we know is that timing of returns is more important than simply rate of return. And that gets to the science of financial planning. That gets to going to the research and really taking a look at what is effective. What are the promises we truly can deliver on? So I think it's important for us to ask ourselves, are we mixing the means with the end? Are we focused on the right outcomes and what's important to our clients in terms of how they're going to define success? And I think it'd be a great conversation in your class to talk about, again, what defines the goals of financial planning. Is it dying with the right number? Is it retiring with a particular number? I happen to think that's not the case, but if you pay attention to commercials, there's a certain commercial for a very large investment and insurance company that suggests it's all about getting the right number at retirement. Is the goal having the maximum probability of not running out of money? Is it income stream? Meeting life goals? These are questions, but I think if we're really committed to best practices, then we're asking ourselves these questions and having these conversations with clients. So what are some of the things that maybe we ought to be tracking on behalf of clients in the context of how we measure success? What are the right measuring sticks? And I think there certainly are some that are quantitative. I think probability of success of meeting goals is a good one. Tracking net worth, because that's telling a story and it is certainly a sign of health. Rods for people's financial health, changes in income and cash flow, their savings rate. All of these things, I think, are relevant and are ways that we measure progress and help the clients celebrate small successes, and they indicate financial health. And there are also ways that we can have a huge impact on our clients' lives. But I also think there are some qualitative ones, and I apologize for this dog. I meant to pick a dog that looked confident and happy to represent, feeling good, but he looks a little bit crazy. But the intent was a happy, smiley dog, because when our clients are feeling good, I think those are valid measurements as well for successful financial planning, that your client has a sense of clarity, of confidence. The couple feels aligned around their goals. They have greater awareness about their money, their emotions around money, how they spend it, where it's going, a sense of resilience, of vigor. They take responsibility, they're focused. These are all things that we can track as we get to know our clients, and they are signs, again, of well-being, of resilience, of emotional strength, and of being prepared and able to handle uncertainties, and they're signs of financial strength. So when I sort of think in broader terms of goals of financial planning, I think there are both, as we just looked at, those intangible qualitative and the tangible, the numbers that we can count. There are goals that can be satisfied in the immediacy, helping a client save for a treasured vacation, building an emergency reserve, getting debt down, while also moving towards future goals. There are goals that satisfy me, the client, but there are goals that I have that will take care of other people in my life. And so I think, again, this is a framework you can use with clients to have a conversation about the value of what you're doing and where they're going to see impact. And again, some of this requires you to be strong in the art of financial planning, and part of it requires you to be well-informed and competent in the science. And then just a couple of other things, if your plate's not already full, to begin thinking a little bit about how we might be framing 21st century planning. We're already over a decade into the 21st century, and for the most part, I think we're all still practicing 20th century financial planning. We're focused on retirement planning, investment return, in a world where there's tremendous uncertainty, but there is a pace of change and improvement in technology, and healthcare and medicine are phenomenal, and people are likely to live to be over 100. And if that's the case, shouldn't some things change in our focus and our language around financial planning? So just a couple of things that I've been exploring, and I know others in the community are exploring. I think looking at the stages of one's life is a very important way of framing financial planning. And it's also something that you can map out for clients that gives them a sense of confidence that you understand that at every life stage there are certain opportunities and risks and emotional changes and things that are going on in a person's life that you are going to help them prepare for. And again, this is an entire presentation in and of itself, but there has been some wonderful conversation and research of late, and theory development around life transitions and life stages. And as we begin to understand more about the aging process, really beginning to change our language and our thinking about the third and fourth stages of life, and understanding that they can be much more vibrant. We don't do a very good job of financial planning around death and dying. It's not a comfortable topic, so it tends to be avoided. But people live a long time potentially in those stages, and we have tremendous value that we can offer. So getting familiar with the different stages of a person's life and thinking through the financial issues, the life and personal issues can allow us to, I think, add tremendous value, because at every stage there are some vulnerabilities that are really quite interesting, and that academic research and survey and long-term studies are helping us really understand better, and can have a great impact on our work as advisors. This is a quote from one of my favorite authors and thinkers, Parker Palmer, and he says, "You must help clients see the potential of abundance that they have and to look at what they already have, their gifts and resources." And I think this is very true in financial planning. I think we tend to focus so much on the financial resources that we don't necessarily help clients see the other resources they have at their disposal. And so I think as we move further into the 21st century, we will pay more attention to the total picture of a client's resources, not only their financial capital, but their human capital, which is their knowledge, their education, their competencies, their skills, their work history, their capacity to earn a living. And for most human beings, that will be the greatest resource they will have in their lifetime. And even more so if people are going to be living much longer lives. People have physical capital. They have their health and well-being. They have social capital. Social capital can also do things that sometimes it can do things better than money at times. So having great neighbors, having a community and a support system and friends and intimate relationships can go a long way to satisfying things that money just doesn't do very well. Emotional capital, another one, in other words, one's own sort of inner sense of self and confidence and resiliency and vigor and will, what we bring to our life day in and day out. When I have a client who if I have two clients, let's say, and they each have the same amount of financial capital, but one client is weak in social and emotional capital and the other one is strong, obviously I have much more confidence in the one that has other strong resources. And in fact, I've had clients who had less in financial resources, but they were so strong in some of these other areas that it more than compensated in terms of their ability to thrive, be resilient, deal with uncertainty and change in conversations that we might really want to be having with clients. And that sort of leads me to the final point of you and what it means to be a 21st century financial planner. And as you're going through this wonderful program, what does it mean to be a planner? And I actually believe that to have the impact that you will have on your clients, you will play all of these roles of being a strategic partner, a filter for your clients between sort of noise and financial pornography and relevant, useful information. You will be their coach. You'll be an igniter of their enthusiasm and their own commitments. And so there are many hats that we wear when we do our work well. And in some ways, I sort of think if we could merge these three characters, you'd sort of have the qualities of the perfect financial planner. And in case you don't know the gentleman in the color picture, that's Vince Lombardi, who's probably one of the greatest football coaches ever, who was a tough taskmaster, a brilliant coach, an inspirer, and tough as nails, and held people accountable. And then, of course, you have Mother Teresa, the epitome of empathy and kindness. And Albert Einstein, one of my favorite people, who I think embodies art and science as well as humor and humility. They're not the most attractive people on the planet, but I think if we could merge their characteristics, we would have the essence of a great financial planner who embodies the art and science of financial planning. One of my favorite quotes when it comes down to it that I think embodies the art and science of financial planning, the qualitative and the quantitative, is this quote here. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. I don't know if you know who said this, but it was in fact Albert Einstein. And I think it sums up the realm in which we're called upon to work, which is we really need to focus on what counts, not just what can be counted. And I think if we hold that, um, we will always be at our best in the work that we do. I leave you with a final quote, again, one of my favorites from a gentleman who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, Reverend Gomes. He was head of the divinity department at Harvard University. He was a guest and keynote speaker for FPA retreat for 2 years. We brought him back. We were so delighted and overwhelmed with his wisdom. And as he got to know us, he offered us this quote: "Financial planners are one of the great generalists left in the world. You are filling a role that no one else can fill as custodians of the values of society." I think that's such a wonderful framework for us to hold, to really take seriously, I think, and not overblown the important work that we have to do. And hopefully it's inspiring to you because you've embarked, I think, on a wonderful path, and I wish you the very best in it. And at this point, I rattled through without taking a breath and giving you the opportunity for questions. So we're sort of right at the hour. So if anyone would like to make a comment or ask a question, we can certainly do that.
Elizabeth, thank you for just a fascinating discussion. A lot of ideas that we really can think about. So are there any questions from the class? Go ahead, Chad, please.
Great. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. I got a lot out of it, so thank you for being here.
Thanks, Chad.
I did have a great. I just had a quick question. I'm always curious. How did you find financial planning as a profession, and what inspired you to pursue that career path?
I have to go way back and try to remember. I have been in the financial industry since end of 1980. I did not start in that field. I started in communications, and so I would say I entered more through the art side in terms of my interests. And of course, at that time, there really wasn't much of a financial planning profession, and so I went the route of going through the investment brokerage world. But quite truthfully, internally, I was always feeling a tension. I don't have any issue. It's not an issue of compensation method. It was more of an issue of wanting to be face to face with clients and really engaged with them. And I had the good fortune to be introduced to a certified financial planner somewhere in the mid 80s. And it was my first exposure to it. And I was so delighted to realize that there actually was a profession and a model for working with clients that looked more holistically at an individual's finances. And so that was sort of what spurred me on to go down that path. It was sort of kind of a twist of fate to get into the industry to begin with. One looks for a job at certain times when you're not finding it in your own field. And I found it fascinating, but it was a long road is the only thing that I'll say. And I think what's so exciting is how far we've come in a relatively short period of time. The profession was founded by basically 12 guys in a room in the mid 70s who had a vision, and that vision has evolved dramatically. And I don't think the ink is dry on the page yet, which is why, I think tonight's topic, one of you will give an art and science presentation in 10 years, and it will be completely different because we'll continue to evolve as we get clearer on what our role is. So that's a bit of my background.
Well, let's do a student roundtable for a moment. And what I'd like to do is give each of you the microphone and share something that really stood out to you from the presentation. But Bob, let me hand the microphone to you and please share.
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. Really enjoyed your presentation. I'm not in the field yet, but I am a career changer, and there were a lot of great takeaways, I think, for somebody like myself that is looking at the industry and a lot to be excited about. You painted, I think, just a very inspiring future for the field and what somebody can contribute to other people's lives. So those are my comments. Thank you so much for, as I said, just a very inspiring presentation this evening.
Thanks, Bob.
Wendy, if I could hand the microphone to you, please.
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much, and I would have guessed the communications because you're such an excellent speaker. I mean, I'm really enthralled by your ability and how well you speak. Thank you so much. What I really like, though, is what you hit on is just the critical thinking, and we're in such uncertainty. And when you started this business, when it was commission only. Have you gone to the flat rate? Have you switched that up based on where we're heading in this new world? What is your take on that?
Well, I don't want to get the feedback. We'll open your mic back up in a minute, Wendy, but thank you for the question. Yes, my practice has evolved over the years, and when I am more or less retired from practicing financial planning at this point and working more as a consultant to financial planners, but my husband still runs our practice, and we merged with another firm a few years ago, and we did move towards what you would call a fee only, more of a retainer model. And my take on that is that I think advisors are well served to understand that they're somewhat on a journey, and that things may change over time, and a suit may fit at one point and then it doesn't fit anymore for whatever reason. But I always encourage advisors to define who they want to serve and what services they want to offer, and then worry about how to get paid for it and what's the best business model. Because I think that order will lead people in a better direction.
Sakura, if I can hand you the mic, please. And make sure to engage your mic. Yeah, it looks like we have, I know Sakura had a little technical problems there, Elizabeth. Chad, if I can hand the microphone back to you, any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Sure. Well, thanks again, Elizabeth. It was truly a remarkable presentation that was extremely thought-provoking, and I echo some of the compliments shared by my student colleagues. I have to tell you, I think one of the final slides where you showcased the ideal makeup of historical figures from our past, I found that pretty awesome, and I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the most attractive things in this field is the balance and blend of the art and the science. Personally, I don't think of myself as an academic, nor would I want to spend my professional career doing something of that sort. So one of the biggest attractions to me was how you can really interact and impact people on a very meaningful level. And your presentation was just terrific. There was certainly plenty of takeaways, and the quotes were just really, really unique and very, very intriguing. So thank you again. I really appreciate the time and the presentation.
Elizabeth,
Well, I hope I get to run into all of you in Capstone down the road.
I hope they do too. And Elizabeth, if I can just maybe ask one question, because one thing you said is you saw a wonderful transition in the industry from where it used to be really a lot of focus on product and more the relationship. And I was wondering if you could share your thoughts. When we talk about the art of financial planning, we're seeing some planners now who actually are becoming life coaches, and they're taking the art to a whole new level. And sometimes students will ask me, where does it stop between being the financial planner and being the psychiatrist? And could you share your thoughts? Where do you think we're going there? At what point, is a ceiling on art, if there is a ceiling?
That's a great question. I don't think there's a ceiling on the art, and I don't think the art is about analyzing someone's inner problems. And so I don't think I think it's an important question to sort of hang out in every now and then and ask ourselves, gee, are we treading in an area where we don't have competence? But I think when you hit that point. I've certainly bumped into it in client situations where I realized, there are some things here that are beyond my scope. This is not my territory. I can have conversations with them about money, their stories about money in their lives. But I am not here to reverse past harms in their life. That needs or to fix their marriage. And so I have never found it unclear when I was getting a glimpse into something that was not within my scope. I think some advisors have decided that there is so much work in that area, and that someone's sort of mental makeup and experiences can have such an impact on their business, either on a full-time basis or as just like we would bring in a CPA or an accountant. At our firm, we actually have a relationship in Atlanta with a psychologist who specializes in money psychology. She's a member of the Financial Therapy Association. I'm also a member of that association, and it's a group of financial planners and therapists who have these conversations and share research and network just like CPAs and financial planners might. And so I think that's a healthy approach. I also belong to an association of people who are life planners. And it's interesting because they will draw the circle and put themselves at the center of it, just like financial planners tend to put ourselves at the center of the circle of a client's issues. We see ourselves as the quarterback. Life planners like to see themselves as the quarterback. That's okay. They do acknowledge that money is a huge issue and that is not their competency. And one of the things, I think I was actually having this conversation today with someone, we can do things that a life planner cannot do, which is we can actually help a client. We can offer skills and tools and resources and guidance and advice that can really do more than just encourage, but can actually make the financial difference. And so to me, that's the marriage of the art and science. I think we're wise to understand, again, that just like we benefit from having geriatric specialists and CPAs and attorneys, we are wise to have centers of influence and allied professionals who are in the mental health areas, who understand, who are coaches, who understand and can invest in our clients in terms of helping them get motivated. We've referred clients to career coaches, to nutritionalists, to a whole number of people because they trust us and we're a resource. So hopefully that's just a little bit of sort of how I think about that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those insights. That really makes sense. And you showed that one slide with all the different roles, and I think a wonderful thing about this industry, we create that niche that we want to work. We have our core competencies, and I think you're right on that. There's some things that's not maybe our expertise. That's not what we can bring to the table, and then maybe other ones can. So again, this has been a wonderful evening. We've been looking forward to your visit. We're so happy that you were able to join us tonight. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Oh, it's been a delight. Thanks so much.